47 days ago, Kurt Busch stood over his brother's grave. Last weekend, he strapped into a race car doing nearly 200 meters an hour at one of the deadliest tracks on the planet. What happened next left the entire racing world speechless. If you want every angle of this story as it develops, hit subscribe now because this coverage is only getting started. Kurt Busch competed this past weekend in the historic sports car racing NASCAR Classic presented by Goodyear, held at the legendary Circuit de la Sarthe near Le Mans, France. This was not a routine race weekend. It marked the first time in nearly 50 years of historic sports car racing history that the series had ever competed overseas. The event ran across 3 days from July 2nd through July 5th and featured a full grid of roughly 36 historic stock cars spanning 7 decades of NASCAR competition. Entries ranged from cars inspired by Richard Petty to machines tied to Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Greg Biffle, alongside a car finished in the garage 56 livery from the 2023 24 Hours of Lemon. For Kurt Busch, this weekend was something far heavier than a vintage racing exhibition. It was his first time competing since his younger brother, Kyle Busch, died suddenly on May 21st at the age of 41. The race itself unfolded across 3 separate events, preceded by 2 qualifying sessions on the Friday of the weekend. British driver Andrew Jordan claimed pole position for the inaugural overseas race in a 2011 Toyota Camry, a former Clint Bauer machine from his time with Michael Walrip Racing. In the second race of the weekend, Kurt Busch piloted his Chevrolet Camaro to a third-place finish. His onboard camera recorded a top speed of 197 miles per hour at one point during the race. The podium finish did not come easily or ceremonially. Busch secured third place by outbraking JC France heading into the final chicane, winning the position by a margin of just 0.011 seconds. That is one of the tightest margins possible in competitive racing, and it proved this was not a driver simply going through the motions. Reporting on the event has varied slightly on which car number Busch carried that weekend. Some coverage places him in his #1 Monster Energy Chevrolet Camaro, a former Chip Ganassi racing chassis he piloted to victory at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in 2020. Other reporting, including a spotter guide published ahead of the event, indicated Busch had switched to running his brother's number 8 as a direct tribute, a change made shortly before the race weekend began. Either way, the emotional weight of the moment stayed the same. This was Kurt Busch's first competitive lap since burying his brother. To understand why this podium finish carries so much weight, it helps to understand exactly what NASCAR lost on May 21st. Kyle Busch was not simply a good driver. He was the winningest driver in NASCAR history across all 3 National Touring Series with 234 total career victories. No driver in the sport's history, including Richard Petty or Dale Earnhardt, has matched that number. Just 6 days before his death, Kyle Busch won a Truck Series race at Dover Motor Speedway, his 69th Truck Series victory, and his 13th career win at that track across all series, leading 147 of 200 laps in the process. He was a 2-time NASCAR Cup Series champion, taking titles in 2015 and 2019, and he also won the 2009 Xfinity Series championship. His Cup Series career alone included 63 victories, the most among active drivers at the time of his death. According to his official death certificate obtained by multiple outlets, including The Athletic and the Associated Press, Kyle Busch died from hemorrhagic shock and disseminated intravascular coagulation, conditions tied to sepsis that had developed from bacterial pneumonia. The certificate stated he had been dealing with pneumonia symptoms for days to weeks before his death. The sepsis itself lasted approximately 1 day before triggering the clotting disorder and the hemorrhagic shock that ultimately caused his death. He continued racing and winning throughout that period, competing at Watkins Glen International on May 10th, where he finished 8th and privately told his team over the radio that he needed medical attention afterward. He was racing and winning up until nearly the final week of his life. Before the green flag dropped at Lemons, Kurt Busch made some of his first public comments since his brother's death. He said, "I said a couple of weeks ago that Kyle's spirit will always ride with me, and the first time will be on one of the greatest tracks in the world this weekend. It is still incomprehensible to think he is gone, not suiting up for the next race as he did for nearly his entire life, but Kyle would have loved to have been right there racing alongside me and our friends at Lemons. It would be great to make it a fitting tribute with a win for him in full Kyle style. These were not the words of a driver treating the weekend as routine. They were the words of a man carrying grief into competition in front of cameras in front of the entire racing world. In earlier comments made before the event, Busch also described the emotional pull of returning to the paddock environment itself, saying, "Testing the car ahead of shipment makes you feel like a kid again," and describing the international field as having a fraternity house feel. There is a strategic and emotional dimension to this comeback that deserves closer examination. Motorsport demands complete focus. At speeds approaching 200 meters an hour, a single lapse in concentration can produce catastrophic consequences. Grief is known to affect reaction time and decision-making, the exact split-second judgments that separate a clean pass from a crash. Despite that risk, Kurt Busch chose to return to competition just 47 days after his brother's death, and he chose to do it on one of the most demanding circuits in the world. The location itself carried additional significance. This was the first time in historic sports car racing's nearly 50-year history that the series had raced outside North America, and the event doubled as a tribute to the 50th anniversary of NASCAR's original appearance at the 24 Hours of Lemons in 1976. When two NASCAR stock cars competed there under the direction of NASCAR founder Bill France Sr., Kurt Busch could have chosen a smaller, lower-pressure event for his return. Instead, he selected the largest possible stage tied to NASCAR's own history. The competitive result reinforces that this was not a ceremonial appearance. A margin of 0.011011 seconds for third place indicates Kurt Busch was racing at full intensity, not simply completing laps for symbolic purposes. This fits within the broader context of his career. Kurt Busch is the 2004 NASCAR Cup Series champion, the winner of the 2017 Daytona 500, and a member of the NASCAR Hall of Fame class of 2026. An induction ceremony where his brother Kyle personally introduced him on stage. During that induction, Kyle Busch told the crowd, "I couldn't be more proud of my brother Kurt, as we're just two kids from Las Vegas, Nevada, raised in a blue-collar, hard-working family where hard work wasn't optional. This Hall of Fame induction isn't just about wins or stats. It's about the years of effort and resilience and the heart that it took to get here. He earned every bit of this, and I'm so proud to call him my brother." Kurt Busch remains the only driver in Cup Series history to win races with 4 different manufacturers, having taken checkered flags in Ford, Chevrolet, Toyota, and Dodge vehicles. And he also won races across 5 different race teams during his Cup Series career: Rouse Racing, Team Penske, Stewart-Haas Racing, Chip Ganassi Racing, and 23XI Racing. He was also the Truck Series Rookie of the Year in 2000 and finished 6th in the 2014 Indianapolis 500, the only open-wheel race of his career. He retired from full-time Cup Series competition following the 2022 season, securing his 34th and final Cup Series victory that year at Kansas Speedway, while driving for 23XI Racing. The opening race of the LAL weekend added an additional layer to the story's connection with NASCAR history. J.C. France, grandson of NASCAR founder Bill France Sr., won that race driving a 2014 Chevrolet Camaro finished in a livery based on the Garage 56 entry that competed at Lemons in 2023. France capitalized when several leaders, including Andrew Jordan, Mike Sheen, and Kurt Busch himself, encountered fuel issues late in the race, with Busch falling from an early 4-way battle for the lead down to 18th place. France's victory arrived exactly 50 years after his grandfather sent NASCAR stock cars to compete at the 24 Hours of Lemons for the first time, a moment organizers and drivers alike described as bringing NASCAR's overseas history full circle. The race weekend was not without incident elsewhere in the field. During the opening race, driver Gary Moore in a 1994 Ford Thunderbird made significant contact with Robin Hose in a 1964 Oldsmobile Cutlass, entering the final corners, sending Moore's car airborne briefly before both spun. For a weekend built around honoring both a fallen driver and a 50-year anniversary, the win by a member of NASCAR's founding family added an unplanned but fitting layer to the storyline. 2 outcomes are now possible as this story continues to develop. In the best-case scenario, Kurt Busch channels this experience into a sustained tribute presence, competing in additional events honoring his brother and potentially targeting a symbolic victory at a track with personal significance to both brothers. In the worst-case scenario, the emotional toll of sustained competition catches up with him at a moment when full concentration is required at high speed. Grief does not operate on a predictable schedule, and motorsport leaves little room for hesitation. Every future appearance Kurt Busch makes on a racetrack will now be